Hi, welcome. For those of you who are not familiar with me and my practice, my name is Megan Warren, and I'm a certified coach specializing in emotional resilience. If you don't know what emotional resilience is, you're not alone. In fact, I didn't learn it until I was an adult. Essentially, emotional resilience is being able to understand who you are at the core of yourself and learning how to show up as the same person in all situations, no matter who's there. And to honor your needs and your wishes, but also create solutions that work for you and the other person in the relationship. In addition to being an emotional resilience coach, I'm also an expat single mom, and my background is in business development and public health. I'm going to be putting out weekly videos, and I'm making them essentially to help you navigate some of the stickier challenges that you encounter in life. So if you want to stay updated, subscribe to my channel. Today's topic is about a discussion that I had with a client recently, and it really resonated with me because it's something that I've struggled with too. So essentially, I thought I'd put it out in this community and see if any of you find it relevant as well. My client and I were talking about sort of the value of sitting with what is. My client questioned the point of looking at the areas of her life that she wasn't happy with, the ones where she felt kind of stuck and incapable of being the author of her own success. And if she couldn't control the outcome, manipulating the external pieces to achieve what she most wanted, then why focus on what she couldn't have? She was already really frustrated with the amount of time that she spent focusing on what was missing in her life. And in fact, she said she'd started playing that what if game, the one where you daydream about how you could get what you wanted or what you want. And then you spend time manipulating all those imaginary pieces of the puzzle. Well, my client had talked about doing that, and she talked about how she kind of, swapped out these imaginary pieces as needed when the reality didn't match the daydream. But she was aware that this wasn't working very well because she hadn't actually moved any closer to what she wanted. She felt really stuck. The what ifs, they weren't working for her, but what is felt pretty terrible. It was not a place that she wanted to spend time. Now, she acknowledged that she spent a lot of her free time and energy in the what if space. And even though it wasn't working, what it did was give her a little bit of hope, so that helped her keep going. She didn't want to quit. But underneath it, she really did feel like quitting. She was good at making friends, and her work and her life required that she make quick decisions. But yet, she was absolutely struggling with finding a partner, and she was struggling to make a decision to buy a house. And it was really kind of a space that felt really lonely and helpless for her. In fact, it felt like shit, is what she said. Why, she asked me, would she want to spend more time dwelling on those things? Now, this resonated with me because I've also felt lonely and helpless at different times in my life. And I've also struggled with decisions, and I have longed for a partnership. And hearing, her tone of disbelief, that felt familiar. It mirrored the skepticism I felt when I first began to learn that the way forward was actually through, not under or not over or around that block. That what is block. So given that block is kind of a big morass of complicated and uncomfortable emotions, and I had spent years building armored walls around that, why would I consider unbricking all that protection? Wasn't the point to stop feeling and focusing on the negative things? And then if I did begin pulling, the bricks out, would it be like that scene in Will and Grace, the one where Will encourages Karen to pull a brick out of the wall, and so she does, and then she absolutely screams, and her terror unnerves him to the point that he ends up making her promise never to tell him what she saw behind the brick. my wall was old enough and thick enough at the time that I started practicing this that I didn't even remember everything it was blocking. Why would I risk it? But sitting with what isn't so much about actively deconstructing the wall. It's more just simply softening. It's a softening that allows you to look at the painful parts of your life and look at them with compassion. Not through a self-improvement lens. You have to remove the self-improvement lens. And to do that, you have to get out of your head and into your heart. Your mind likes to map its way out of what is and into the what if space because possibility feels a lot less scary and painful than, the current state of affairs. But that what if game, it's like Alice in Wonderland. It's a maze of negative thought loops that involve imaginary pieces of a puzzle. And building a life around imaginary pieces of a puzzle or, without access to critical data, the things that are behind the wall, well, it's inefficient at best. But, inefficiency is a lot more familiar than the uncertainty of doing something new. And inefficiency, while it feels frustrating and stressful, well, it's less risky sometimes than facing and feeling something as terrifying as the shame of inadequacy. And for me, as a project manager, accustomed to, I was good at proactively managing risk. And, I'm a single mother. I'm living in a foreign country. I felt constantly, and still sometimes do, overwhelmed by the demands of life. And so looking at and admitting to such a scary state of affairs, much less accepting my own personal sense of overwhelm or that bone-deep loneliness, well, it wasn't really something I wanted to do. So I could understand my client. It reminds me of a children's book. It's called Going on a Bear Hunt. And the characters in it, they go through a series of really challenging situations. So they get lost in a snowstorm, they get stuck in a muddy, squelchy bog, and they have to tiptoe through a big dark cave and essentially before they come face to face with a terrifying bear. Now, in the story, they realize that in each scary and uncomfortable challenge, they can't go over it, they can't go under it. They've got to go through it. That's the only way they can get there. And so, for me, I liken that to sitting with what is, because it's a process of self-acceptance in which you consciously choose to go through it, to sit with the flat grayness of the dissatisfaction you feel, or the raw ache of your loneliness, and to look at it full on. You consciously choose to go through it, to acknowledge it and feel it, every sucky piece. You stop avoiding it, and you stop bricking your way around it. You sit with the pain with the intention to compassionately accept it as it is. You don't sit with it with the intention to improve it or, fix it. And you don't sit in judgment of the pain or the situation, the one where you discount what you feel. No, this one is more like you're a gladiator in the ring. You soften to the idea that you are actually trapped in the ring with a beast and you can't change it. The only thing you can do is courageously turn and face that lion or that whatever the beast is without weapons. And yeah, it does sound crazy. It sounds insane. We aren't built for this, right? We learned that the hot stove blisters our hands, so we don't touch it. And we learned that shame and heartbreak and fear, they hurt. So we do everything in our power to avoid feeling them. So what I've just suggested sounds insane, sounds crazy. Turning to face and feel the pain is counterintuitive. And I can't promise that it's not going to hurt. I can, however, promise that it won't be a massacre. Instead, you'll be like a phoenix rising from the ashes, because when you turn and face the pain and you go through it, it causes the fire to burn out. Facing it gives you power. You realize that you are fireproof because you walked into the fire And you not only survived, but you came out stronger. Sometimes, Glennon Doyle talks about this in her book Untamed, you have to have the courage to burn it all down, to do what hurts most, to move through and beyond the pain. And if you don't choose to go through the pain, you still feel the burn. And those unacknowledged and uncomfortable feelings, well, they direct your actions because you're turning away from the stove. So you're unconsciously making choices, or in some cases avoiding choices, right? To ensure that you don't have to feel the pain. Maybe you're a master compartmentalizer and you don't have to deal. The point though is that compartmentalizing doesn't actually mean that you avoid the effects of, right? You're not avoiding the effects of the disappointment, the guilt, or the fear. Instead, compartmentalizing actually translates to you choosing to abandon your power, because you're giving the painful feelings that, right, you're not ostensibly feeling, but you're giving them power over you. When you make or you don't make choices designed to avoid something, you aren't choosing the path of greatest reward, the path where you'd go in the absence of those negative feelings. Now, to be clear, those feelings, I've mentioned that they were invisible. Well, they may not be invisible, maybe because you're aware that you're lonely, or you're ashamed, or you're disappointed. But if you can't define, trace, and connect them, and most importantly, sit with them, then they are kind of a blurry, amorphous mass, and they might as well be invisible for all the clarity that you have. And if you're buffering those feelings with TV or alcohol or impulse shopping, well, then you're not facing them. And when you aren't sitting with them and softening toward them and validating that experience, you are choosing to give them the power to define and shape your experience. So let me give you an example of how this shows up for me. Early in relationships, I was disappointed. And so I formed habits, even prior to being a teenager, that really helped me repress emotions and build big walls. Walls that made me feel self-sufficient, self-contained. And those feelings of disappointment and fear and loneliness, well, they're still here today. But when I don't sit with them, I can see a change in how I handle current relationships in my life. Almost unconsciously, when something happens that doesn't feel good or triggers some of those same feelings, my go-to attachment style is avoidant dismissive. I become very self-contained. I avoid what I don't like. So when I feel lonely, for example, I turn away from people. I build my walls even higher. I don't need anyone, right? So, well, I can't be lonely. And at that point, I'm not actively acknowledging the pain, but it is absolutely guiding my decisions. So when I choose not to call a friend and I go to bed early after eating a lot of sugar, it's because I'm avoiding those feelings and they are guiding what I'm doing. Now, I know this pattern doesn't actually serve me. It not only blocks my ability to connect, it actually intensifies that solitude and traps me in this bone-deep loneliness behind walls that, oh Lord, they would have protected a 17th century chateau under siege, right? In the times, though, that I'm able to pause and to soften, the acknowledgement, it makes me cry. I won't sugarcoat it. It hurts. But then it changes how I show up because I'm able to practice mindfulness. I'm able to release emotions, and that gives me a different space. So after a good emotional cleanse, I call that friend. I actively seek the connection, where previously I saw that connection kind of as a problem, right? Not a solution. And then making a connection, well, it disrupts that circular emotional avoidant pattern and allows me to inhabit an entirely different space. Am I still lonely? Yes. Did it lead to a partner? Not yet. I think part of what my client is asking is, why break the circle if you can't control the outcome? If you aren't guaranteed that facing the pain will produce a result that you want, a partner, a home, a job, the things that you crave most in the world, then why would you risk it? Why would you dwell on it? Won't focusing on it just make it more painful? Unfortunately, it's true. You can't control the outcome as much as I would like to. You can, however, choose whether you want to make it worse and absolutely guarantee that you won't have a different outcome. Or you can choose to do it differently, which then opens new possibilities. And doing it differently means accepting what is, softening to admit and accept what you really want and really feel in order to release it. This process, while it's not a guarantee, will create new opportunities that are not available if you show up in the same way every time. This process, it also ensures that you don't suffer from the buildup of toxic emotions. And unlike spending time in the what-ifs where you manipulate things that aren't real and that may actually never materialize, spending time in the what is empowers you to figure out how to make that reality work for you. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope that you're better able to see the value of facing your discomfort. And as you begin to undertake this, I wish you courage and persistence. It's hard to soften towards and sit with pain, but it is absolutely worth it. I challenge you to set aside some time to identify one place that you feel stuck. Perhaps you can't make a decision about work, or you're constantly fighting with a partner or a friend. Find the privacy, that part's important, and the space to sit down and simply reflect on the feelings that arise as you think about that situation. And as the emotions come, let them come. Soften, don't block them. Cry, shout, pound the sofa, pace. Do whatever you need to do to acknowledge them and the fact that the situation may not change. And then visualize releasing them. Whether that's as, liquid pouring out of you or thick chunks of rage that you hack out and throw away, or shame that you peel off like a second skin. Repeat this process as many times as needed until your anger or the disappointment, until it hurts less. And then once you move that needle from the top of the gauge, let's say a 10, and you move it to the bottom to maybe a 3 or under, pause and then take a look at the situation again and see if there's any difference in how you approach it. And then come back to this community and share how it worked. Please also share your frustrations and where you got stuck so we can figure out together how to get you unstuck. Thank you so much for listening today. If you'd like to learn more about self-acceptance or you want to start a private discussion, contact me on my website. It's www.meganwarrencoaching.com. You'll also find a link to schedule a free discovery call with me and the blog post that's related to this video if you want to read more. I wish you well. Bye.